Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to cover two more scary episodes from the classic horror anthology Tales from the Darkside. As always, I'll recap the story and share a bit of behind the scenes info after each segment. I always recommend watching these episodes as intended first. I'll put links in the description below just in case you want to buy the complete series for yourself. I also have a Patreon page where you can watch all my videos, excluding my gaming content, ad-free. I'll put a link for that down below as well. But with all that out of the way, grab your shovels and dig yourself a plot. These spooky stories are coming, ready or not. Our first story is titled The Devil's Advocate, from Season 2, Episode 7, originally airing on November 10th, 1985. Our story starts inside the radio studio of Luther Mandrake, a hate-filled host of a radio call-in show, who comes into the studio late, complaining to his sound engineer that when he came out to his car to come to work, there was a dead man behind the wheel of his car. He says that he called the cops and complains about the dead man, saying that he hasn't missed a show in over 13 years, but the police refuse to allow him to leave. He angrily recounts the events while preparing himself soup before going on the air. He makes it on time but complains to the engineer all the way up to the point of midnight when his show goes live. At the signal, Mandrake drops the ranting and raving and goes through with the introduction of his show, warning his listeners that he's on a rampage tonight, so if they call in, they might get a meaner response than normal. He says that he had to walk to work, all because there was a dead guy found in his car, and the cops questioned him and refused to let him take his car. He continues that he's on the warpath about police, and if anyone wants to call in and talk about cops, he's ready and willing to argue. The phone rings, and it's a woman from Cincinnati. Mandrake asks what bugs her about police. The woman says nothing, but wants to talk about how her husband got fired after being a steam fitter for the last 24 years. Mandrake jokes that he wouldn't have been a steam fitter for 24 minutes, let alone 24 years. He tells her that this is a time for celebration, and that they should go out to eat and order the most expensive things on the menu, telling her not to worry about paying, because he and millions of other hard-working Americans will be paying the bill, while backhandedly welcoming her to welfare. The woman, audibly upset, says that she only called in because a neighbor lady said he was a person who gives no-holds-barred advice. She says that she'd already had enough of him and won't ever call again. Mandrake says he had enough of the human condition before hanging up on the woman, showing us that Mandrake isn't a pleasant person, as the phone line rings again and Mandrake answers. A man from Pittsburgh calls in. Mandrake assumes the man doesn't have a job, but he's quickly corrected, the man saying he's a night watchman. Mandrake, using the man's job as a jumping-off point, says that he watches while everyone else leads a better life than him, calling the man a loser, while unknowingly spilling soup on his radio equipment. He continues to unjustifiably lean into the man and asking his engineer if everyone that calls in is a loser, while watering his plants. But the man defends himself. Mandrake notices his engineer is asleep at the controls. The man on the phone continues to lay into him, saying that he is a working stiff like everyone that calls in. The only difference is when people get sick of listening to Mandrake, they can turn their radios off, but Mandrake is forced to listen to all of them. Mandrake doubles down on the insults, attempting to dress the man down with more and more venom as he slowly begins to transform, becoming more and more haggard, hair sprouting from his jawline and his brow furrowing. As their argument hits a fever pitch, Mandrake begins to look more monstrous, telling the listener that he has given up on humanity, saying that he lost his parents due to a crappy pilot crashing a plane, he lost his wife to a crappy doctor, and his son died due to a drunken idiot hitting a pothole, as he goes on to insult the man calling in and each and every one of his listeners. The man on the phone calls Mandrake sour, saying he'll no longer be listening to him due to how toxic he's become over the years, saying that rather than being the devil's advocate, he became the devil himself. saying that he hopes people stop listening and calling in, hoping that Mandrake has to sit wherever he is and rot until the end of time, before slamming down the phone and hanging up. He continues his radio show, saying that people can't tune him out, that in fact people are drawn to him like moths to a flame. He says that it's time for a commercial break, but that his engineer is nowhere to be found, so he continues on his rant, saying that the worthless listeners will buy their products whether the commercials run or not. He gets another caller, but this one's a bit strange. Mandrake notices the dial isn't working right, and there's interference. He tells the woman to turn down a radio, but the woman says she doesn't have one. He says that her phone line is breaking up, and that she needs to get to the point or hang up the phone. The woman says that the nearest phone to her is a general store, slightly laughing that people don't have phones in their home, and that radios are hard to come by in 1922. Mandrake, looking more beastly and thinking the woman isn't in her right mind, asks in a cocky tone that if the woman doesn't have a phone or radio, then how is she hearing him and talking to him right now? The woman says that she doesn't know, but she is hearing everything he's saying, and that she doesn't like the way he's been treating people. Hearing enough, he hangs up on the woman. The next caller is a man who doesn't even introduce himself, only saying that President Wilson is making some poor choices. Mandrake hangs up with hardly a response, thinking that he's getting nothing but a bunch of old and senile callers. Mandrake, looking more and more monstrous, picks up another line asking where in time this caller is from, and the man begins talking about how horrible concentration camps are. Mandrake hangs up on him right away. The next caller doesn't wait for introductions, saying that Mandrake is evil. Mandrake asks what date is on her newspaper. The woman asks why, and Mandrake, half joking, asks again. She says it's June 17th, 1967. Mandrake hangs up and asks if his listeners are collectively trying to prank him. He looks up to see what his engineer can do to screen the callers, only to see the window to the engineering booth is now just a brick wall. He goes over and pushes on it, convinced it isn't real. He turns back and sees his setup and notices the door is missing, meaning he's trapped in his studio. He tries to pick up the phone to get an outside line, but the automated voice says there are no connections. He screams into the phone in desperation. He sees all the phone lines lighting up with callers. He reaches for his headset, noticing his hands have become more demonic. Mandrake hears a booming voice calling out to him. Mandrake, scared, asks who's there. The booming voice says that he's his boss. He congratulates him on his 13 years, saying that he couldn't have asked for a better advocate, saying that he made more people turn to him than he could have ever possibly hoped for, all with an evil giggle. Mandrake's show is interrupted by a news bulletin. A newscaster says that the body of Luther Mandrake was found dead in his car. No cause of death is known at this time, but the newscaster says that Mandrake is hopefully still doing his radio show in hell where he belongs. The booming voice begins laughing again as the news bulletin ends. Time passes and we see Mandrake, fully demonic, still taking calls as the switchboard continues to glow. As the booming laugh continues to bellow, Mandrake looks tired and tortured. He realizes that this is his eternal damnation, endless calls on an endless show for his years of venom and vigor, as the screen fades to black. When it comes to The Devil's Advocate, this story was adapted from an original teleplay by horror legend George Romero, best known for directing Night of the Living Dead. The episode functions as a modern morality tale, exploring themes of anger, isolation, and self-destruction. Most of the action takes place in a single setting, a late-night AM radio booth, making it a bottle episode that relies heavily on dialogue, character development, and eerie sound cues to build tension. The lead role was played by the late, great Jerry Stiller, widely recognized as Frank Costanza from Seinfeld, and Arthur Spooner from The King of Queens. In this story, however, he plays a vitriolic, cynical talk show host, a far departure from his usual comedic characters. This dramatic role allowed him to showcase a darker, more intense side of his acting, supported by creepy prosthetic makeup and special effects to represent his character's gradual transformation. At the time of its release, the episode was well received by fans and critics alike, praised for its strong performance and psychological depth, While it doesn't feature the typical monster or gore elements found in other episodes, viewers appreciated its slow burn tension and twist ending. Today, The Devil's Advocate maintains a cult following, often recommended for its unusual storytelling, atmospheric sound design, and standout central performance. Honestly, the idea is sold beautifully, and it's stories like this that make me wish some Darkside episodes ran a touch longer. To me, it seemed just as the story started to settle in and get good, it was over. Overall, it's a strong episode that definitely leaves you wanting more. Our next story is titled Halloween Candy, from Season 2, Episode 5, originally airing on October 27th, 1985. Our story starts on Halloween night, a bunch of kids trick-or-treating. Mr. Killip talks with his son Tim about Halloween. Killip says that he hates Halloween, saying that last year kids played tricks, putting soap on his windows and toilet paper in his trees. Tim says it's because he refused to hand out any candy, and that he's the only person on the block that refuses. Tim goes into the kitchen and pours candy into bowls, after which he returns to the living room, bowls in hand, telling his father that he doesn't want to clean the windows or trees this year, saying to just avoid it and hand out the candy. Killip says it's a waste of money, telling his son that if he wants the candy handed out, he'll have to stay and do it himself. Tim refuses, saying that he's old but not senile or crippled, and that he could and should get up and hand out the candy himself. Grumpy as ever, Killip grimly jokes that maybe some of them will drop dead right at his doorstep. Tim shakes his head, sarcastically saying he wonders why he isn't more popular in the neighborhood, being such a loving and caring person. Tim goes to leave, and Killip tells him to lock the windows before he does, saying that kids these days break in and try to scare you for not giving them what they want. Tim, frustrated, yells at him one last time to just give out the candy. Killip makes Tim lock his windows before leaving, Killip saying he hates Halloween as Tim walks out the door. Killip gets his first trick-or-treater, a young boy dressed in a bunny outfit. Killip tells the kid to get lost, saying that he doesn't have any candy and wouldn't hand it over if he did, before slamming the door in the kid's face. The kid's about to spray paint his door when Killip opens it, telling the kid to buzz off. The kid books it down the driveway, and Killip slams the door closed once again. Just as he goes to sit down, another kid dressed as a clown rings his doorbell. Killip turns him away, telling him that if he does anything to his house, he'll call the police. The kid is taken aback at the tense and hostile reaction. Killip yells at the kid to scram, and the child runs in fear. The door barely closes before another kid rings the bell, this one dressed up as the devil. Killip is convinced it's the same kid with a different mask and closes the door, only for the bell to ring again. Killip yells out for the little monsters to go to hell, but the bell keeps ringing. Being bitter, Killip pours honey and glue into the bowl of candy and pours the goopy mess into the kid's bag, calling it goblin candy. The little kid recoils before walking away. Killip closes the door, giggling to himself. Later that night, Killip falls asleep in his chair watching TV as an unseen figure approaches his door. We see flashes of his nightmare before the ringing doorbell jolts him awake. Killip looks at his watch, noting that it's 11:30 at night, wondering what children would be out at that hour. Instead of answering the door, he lights up a smoke, takes a single puff before the bell rings again. He looks out the window to see nobody at his door, but the doorbell continues to buzz. The door swings open as he approaches. A hooded figure says, "Trick or treat," in a deep, growling voice. Killip says he's all out and gave it to the last kid hours ago, before slamming the door and locking it. The doorknob turns as the deep voice continues to repeat the words, "Trick or treat." Killip backs away from the door, telling the person to go away. He lifts up the blinds to see a pair of monstrous eyes staring at him. He opens the door to yell at the perceived child, before slamming it closed again. The door violently opens again, the monster deeply growling, "Trick or treat." Killip backs away slowly. The creature grabs a piece of candy out of the bowl and drops it into its bag. It goes to reach for another, but Killip stops him, grabbing the creature's hand. The monster gets free, swiping off Killip's watch. It tumbles out of the doorway and leaps up on the outside banister and playfully waves as Killip looks on in stunned silence. The front door closes on its own, and when Killip forces it open, the creature is gone. Killip closes the door again, scratching his head. He takes a step back into his house, but hears a crack. He looks down and sees that he broke his watch. As he picks it up, the midnight bell of the clock in his house chimes. He goes to sit back down in his chair and begins watching TV when he notices the bag dropped by the creature begins to wiggle and move, as if something is alive inside. Killip gets up to investigate and sees dozens of bugs scatter from the bag. He goes upstairs to try and call his son, but every time he tries to dial a number, he gets an automated message stating the time. He tries multiple times, even the operator, only for the same message to play. Hours seem to have passed, and Killip falls asleep in his chair once again. He wakes up and says it feels like morning, and that he's ready for breakfast. He goes to use the phone again, but the automated voice just repeats that the current time is midnight. Killip hangs up the phone and wanders out into his kitchen. He says he knows he slept for hours, and he notices it's dark outside and says that it's just early morning, trying to convince himself. He sees a clock in his kitchen, and the hands are frozen at midnight. He says that he doesn't care what time it actually is, and that he's hungry. He opens his fridge, and one of his eggs rolls out and cracks open on the floor, only for dozens of roaches to scatter from the broken egg. He looks up and sees dozens more crawling on his counters and stovetop. He frantically tries to open the back door to leave, but it refuses to budge. He looks back up and all the bugs are gone, as if it was just a figment of his imagination. Trying to get a grip, he drinks a glass of water as the goblin from earlier leers at him through the window. Killip turns around, only to see the creature dart from sight. Killip, with a horrified look on his face, says that it's a face, not a mask. He looks down and sees roaches in his glass of water and drops it. The glass shatters on the floor and the bugs scatter. He hears his doorbell ring and rushes to answer it, but the door won't open. Killip rips the blinds off the window and tries to break the window with his cane, but it does nothing. The monster appears on the TV and, in a deep growl, asks, "Treats or tricks?" Killip uses his cane to smash his TV. He turns around to find the creature, sitting and waving while sitting on his porch swing. He looks over to see the door wide open, and looks back to see the creature is now gone. He rushes for the door, only to come face to face with the goblin. The sight of the creature causes Killip to trip over the table and tumble to the floor. The creature pats his head before walking off. Tim returns the next day to find his father dead on the floor. Time passes and the police arrive. They tell Tim he should get a lawyer. Tim asks why. The police officer says it's the clearest case of elderly neglect he's ever seen. Killip's cause of death was starvation. Said he fell, broke his hip, and lived on nothing but candy until he died. Tim says that's impossible. He dropped off the candy the night before for him to hand out on Halloween. We're left with the realization that the goblin stopped time, leaving Killip stuck on the night he hated the most, until he eventually died. All we see is the petrified look on Killip's face as the screen fades to black. When it comes to Halloween candy, the episode was written by Michael McDowell, later known for Beetlejuice and the Thinner adaptation, and was directed by legendary special effects artist Tom Savini. It blends dark, dry humor with a moral twist, resembling a grim version of A Christmas Carol mixed with the Creepshow story, They're Creeping Up on You. The episode stars Roy Poole as Mr. Killip, delivering a memorable performance as the bitter protagonist. Behind the scenes, Tom Savini designed the goblin creature that haunts Killip, with help from future FX greats like Greg Nicotero and Howard Berger. At the time of its release, Halloween Candy was praised as one of the standout episodes of the season. Fans appreciated its clever story, and it was highlighted for its effective practical effects and twist ending. Even though mainstream critics didn't widely review it, the episode quickly became a favorite among viewers of the show. Over the years, the episode has maintained a beloved following, particularly among horror fans around Halloween. Forums and fan lists often cite it as one of the best Darkside episodes. Even today, Halloween Candy continues to be celebrated for its clever concept and execution. Personally, what I love most about the episode is how the goblin is both creepy and playful, often doing things like gleefully waving after scaring Killip or patting his head after causing the old man to take a tumble. But with all that said, that's all I have for you in this one. I want to say a special thank you to our channel members and to all of you who take the time to watch these videos. Take care, have a great week, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.